A very good day to you and welcome to this service of worship for Sunday the 16th of August. For those of you who are joining us for the first time in these video services, my name is Lewis and I'm the minister to Nottage General Baptist and Unitarian Chapel. And if you are new to these services, a very warm welcome to you. We're glad you dropped by. And we begin our worship with some words from the Atharva Veda. May the atmosphere we breathe fearlessness into us. Fearlessness on earth and fearlessness in heaven. May fearlessness guard us behind and before. May fearlessness surround us above and below. May we be without fear of friend or foe. May we be without fear by night and by day. Let the entire world be our friend. Now, the reading I have chosen for today's service is from the Gospel of Matthew, and it's the 13th chapter, verses 24 to 30. It's the parable of the wheat and weeds. Here is another story Jesus told. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. But that night, as the workers slept, his enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat, then slipped away. When the crop began to grow and produce grain, the weeds also grew. The farmer's workers went to him and said, "Sir, the fields where you planted that good seed is full of weeds. Where did they come from?" "An enemy has done this," exclaimed the farmer. "Should we pull out the weeds?" they asked. "No," he replied. "You'll uproot the wheat if you do. Let both grow together until the harvest. Then I will tell the harvesters to sort out the weeds, tie them into bundles and burn them, and to put the wheat in the barn." That ends our reading from Matthew's Gospel. Would you now please join me in the sacred space of prayer? Here in this time, made sacred by our shared lives and our shared yearnings, may we find new courage, new generosity of spirit, forgiveness given and received, and rededication to the higher purposes of our lives. Let us not add to the hopelessness that is in the world, but may wonder and adventure, curiosity and humour live in us always. May there be aroused in us a determination that by the fuller living of our lives we might find the meaning that life is trying to teach us. Though we seek always for our lives to be full of goodness, we sometimes lack courage to do right and to right the injustices that confront us. Though we seek always to be generous, sometimes our selfishness has killed the soil with excessive chemicals, turning fertile paddocks into lifeless salt plains. Though we seek always to understand the larger mysteries, sometimes we become insensitive to the groans of the spirit of creation. All this we lament. May we now be filled with new passion, new resolve to take the next step in our own lives and in the life of the earth. May the little that we know become enough to guide us while we seek for new wisdom. What our prayers begin, may our lives continue. May this always be our prayer. And I will invite you to join me, should you wish, in saying the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Now, as a minister of religion, one of the questions I am asked on a very frequent basis is, if there is such thing as a God, why does this apparently all-powerful, benevolent being allow so many evil things to happen in the world? The answer I'm most likely to give in such situations would be something like, well, we cannot experience all that is good in life without all that is bad existing side by side. Now, there's a story which you may have heard before of an old Cherokee man teaching his grandson all about life. And he says to the boy, "A fight is going on inside of me. It is a terrible fight between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The same fight is going on inside of you and inside every other person too. The grandson thought for a moment and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old Cherokee man simply replied, "The one you feed." As is the case with all parables, this story has many levels of meaning to it. One of these meanings is something that might be called divine providence. This can be described as the concept that the goal of that which we call God is to have a community of human beings who are in loving relationship with each other, with God, and with all created things. What this means is that the communities we live in are not only a means to our spiritual development, they are in fact the goal of our spiritual development. Ultimately, if we can make our communities more loving and more heaven-like, we are actually facilitating God's divine plan. When we as humans experience things such as disease or poverty or the loss of a loved one, we think of it as a tragedy. Of course, these experiences and these circumstances are very painful. But from a spiritual perspective, they are nowhere near as important as what's going on inside us. If we become bitter and self-absorbed through tragedy, this is a much worse tragedy than the physical circumstances that triggered our bitterness. But if we become more thoughtful and compassionate human beings through our experience of personal and community tragedy, the temporary pain we will feel will be far outweighed by the permanent spiritual growth that we experience because of and through the tragedy. Whatever our outward circumstances, we have a choice in how to respond to them. In our response, we must act in freedom according to reason. This also brings us to another major reason given for why there is evil as well as good in the world. In theory, a creator God could have fashioned a universe in which there was no possibility of evil. However, it's my belief that there is a divine objective that is far higher than simply the prevention of evil. God, the divine, desires human community and human relationships. And human relationships mean freely chosen relationships. Perhaps God could have made us to automatically understand and to love each other. But that would be no different to a computer whiz kid writing a program that prints "I love you" on a VDU screen. If we had no choice in these matters, our love would not be genuine. The only way we would be there would be if there was to be another possibility. That possibility is the denial of goodness, the denial of truth. In other words, wickedness and falsity. So wickedness and falsity are necessary, otherwise we could not be truly human, nor could we have truly human relationships. We could not have a loving human community, which is the whole purpose of creation. We find ourselves in a situation where, through our own choices and others' mistaken choices, our mistaken and others' mistaken choices, where we experience terribly painful and sometimes evil things that we inflict upon each other. So what can we do about this? Well, the same freedom and rationality that enabled us to go off the rails into selfish and destructive behaviour can also be the tool in our hands to get us back on track. God will never force us through outward circumstances to believe in God and to love good and spiritual things. But we can force ourselves to do so. Each of us has the capability of knowing what is right and what is wrong. Each of us is also capable of making choices about which way we will go, even when we are faced with the big choices and the big decisions in life. As hard as it sometimes is, we need to make the choice between I'll try to say that again in better words than I've written. As hard as it sometimes is, we need to make the choice to believe and to do what is good and right. We cannot be expected to be able to root out every false idea or selfish motive that flashes into our heads. But we are expected to take our lives in hand and avoid acting upon those negative impulses. If we do our part and demand of ourselves to make the right choices, we will, over time, be freed from those wrong thoughts, those wrong feelings, and those wrong behaviours. Yes, there is evil in the world. Yes, there is evil in our own lives. Some of it we are personally responsible for because of bad choices we have made. Much of it we are not personally responsible for. But we are responsible for our reaction to it. And our response to each tragedy and injustice that we see or experience will determine whether we join with that particular evil and make it part of ourselves, or whether we resist it and help to overcome it, both in ourselves and in our communities. However, in all we do, we will only be successful spiritually if we recognize that it is divine providence running the show. If we are willing to accept this and to put ourselves in the flow of divine providence, in the flow of the universe, if that's how you would rather call it, then both the good and evil things that happen to us will help us move forward toward the goal of a community of people who live together in mutual love and understanding. Thank you for listening, and Amen. Now we are one more baby step closer to being able to resume face-to-face worship at Nottage Chapel. However, in the first instance, it is likely to be on a very limited scale. I will, of course, update you further when I know via these videos, which will probably continue for at least a little while once face-to-face worship resumes, but also through the Facebook page and the website and Twitter, should you be a tweeter. As I've said for the duration of this pandemic, that if we can help in any way, then please do contact us either via the Facebook page, Twitter, or my email address, which is nottage.minister@gmail.com. And we will help in whichever way we can, or direct you, if we can, to somebody who is in a position to be able to assist you. Once again, thank you for joining us for this service of worship. If you live in the Porthcawl or Bridgend or farther afield, if you'd like to travel, and especially when we're back to more regular services, then we would be very pleased to meet you in the flesh, so to speak. And we bring this service to a close with these words of benediction. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make the world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day. Amen.